Now this is probably, I'm ranking this right up there with maybe Hagler Hearns as one of the best fights of 10 minutes or less in the history of fights. that was an absolute war. But what's crazy at the end, what was Rick Tocchet doing with that sledgehammer thing on your head at the end of that?
No, you know what? That was in that fight was in overtime. That was at the end of the game because
Yeah,
I come around the net and hit Mark Howe, and Mark Howe would have been one of the untouchable guys, of being probably top two or three
yeah,
defensemen in the league, especially at that time, right? And so he and so I had my gloves off
right.
already, and I thought the first two or three guys that were coming were going to fight, and they didn't. And then all of a sudden, I was bent over picking the gloves off, and here comes Talk, and and then it was a goal, and then you had two 5'11" guys going at it, and neither one of us smart enough to stop punching. I think we both kept switching hands, so it was an exciting tilt that everybody and Rick would have had fun doing it because he's back in his hometown in Toronto probably. So all his
Right.
Scarborough buddies would have been there watching. So it would have been an awesome, exciting time for the building.
Yeah, that was nasty, wicked. Tell me, who's the toughest guy you ever fought? This is a question of a viewer named Gord who wants to know who's the toughest guy you
Yeah,
ever
you
fought.
know what? There is no toughest because every like you go to Rick Talk and Dave Brown in Philly and Probert and Kosher in Detroit, and you go every team back then had two to three guys. But I always say the meanest guy ever was Ben Wilson in Chicago. He just soon spear you in the face as he scared more people in the league because that's how he played 8 years. He scared the Dickens out of the league, and that's how he lasted. It wasn't because of talent; it was because of how tough he was. And then my first two fights in the NHL ever were Marty McSorley. He's another guy that didn't read that I went first overall. I wasn't going for the tough guy job.
Yeah.
So that was my rookie season against Edmonton was the first two fights. And then, but when I go all-time toughness, and it isn't always to do with fighting, is I always give it to probably Proby because here's a guy at 36. He was still fighting the next heavyweight at 20 that was coming into the league, and Proby being the guy that everybody looked to because he looked like the prototypical league heavyweight with half his teeth missing and his sweater didn't fit, and he just looked like the heavyweight. So he kept fighting those 20-year-olds, and he was 36. That's a whole set of mental toughness right there. So Proby had a level of mental toughness when he was still going at those young kids.
Yeah, he was legendary. No doubt about that. Of course, the McSorley fight that was after McSorley hit Doug Gilmour with that vicious check. This is in the playoffs. This is a huge game, and I don't know. You had three goals in that game too. I mean, what a game for you! You had three goals. You had the scrap with McSorley, and the only bummer was that Kerry Fraser somehow missed an obvious high sticking call in Doug
Yeah.
Gilmour on overtime, or otherwise you guys are winning this series. But here's that Gilmour hit, and then the subsequent
Yeah, no,
tilt with Marty.
yeah, no, Marty. That was game one, and Marty, he was probably setting a thing, going, "We're not out of this," because I think we were going to win the game by then handily. And then earlier in the playoffs, we had played Detroit, and we were down early 2 games, and I wasn't in a fight yet, and nothing had started, and it looked like Detroit was going to win, and I was taking a lot of heat for not fighting and not trying to change something. And nobody knows this, but Pat Burns, before the series started against Detroit, said, "You are not to fight Probert no matter what happens. No fighting Probert." And then, so that goes through, and it worked. We end up winning the series, and we come back and win the series. And then all I know is that when Dougie got hit, I just remember Pat Burns didn't say I couldn't fight Marty. And so then that was
Yeah,
the big
right.
tilt and kind of set off that whole game one, set off the atmosphere for that 7 game series. And about 20 years later, I figured out if I was any smarter, Marty went at our best player and hit Dougie. I should have just skated over the bench and punched Gretzky because Gretzky's the
Yeah,
guy
right
by
there.
game seven that had 5 points, right? So if he went at our best guy, I should have
Right.
just went and hit their best.